Welcome to the Save What You Love podcast. I'm your host, Mark Titus. On today's show, I welcome friend and James Beard award-winning chef Renee Erickson. Renee is an award-winning chef, restaurateur, artist, and author based here in Seattle. And Renee bought the beloved Boat Street Cafe here in 1998 and went on to form Sea Creatures, her Seattle restaurant group, including heralded restaurants like the Walrus and Carpenter, the Whale Winds, Westward, and Lioness. Her new cookbook, Sunlight and Breadcrumbs, explores the surprising wonder and satisfaction you can find in making everyday food, inspiring us all to cook creatively. Renee decided to reconnect with her creativity by painting, taking photographs, making ceramics, and of course, cooking everything you will find inside its charming pages. As a backstory, Renee graduated from the University of Washington with a BFA in painting and printmaking and currently serves on the board of UW's School of Art plus Art History plus Design. She lives in Seattle's Finney Ridge neighborhood with her husband Dan, Kitty B, and her pooch Bowie. In this episode, Renee and I talk about her new book. Sunlight and Breadcrumbs. Taking the circuitous path to find your passion. Art intersecting with food. The treasure of growing up in the Pacific Northwest. Food and business as social activism. Crabbing and fishing for dogfish and the sanctity of salmon. Doing something in the face of challenges. This is a great episode with a good friend, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you've enjoyed this season of the Save What You Love podcast. We're going to be back for another season early summer next year. And if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, you can do so by going to Apple Podcasts and subscribing, or at if you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet, please do so. And if you wouldn't mind giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts, writing a review really helps create the exposure needed to keep this thing moving out into the world. Thanks for being a part of this audience, and we'll see you down the trail.
How do you say what you love when the world is burning down? How do you say what you love when pushes come to shove? How do you say what you love when things are upside down? How do you say what you love when times are getting tough?
Chef Renee Erickson, it's good to see you. Where are you coming to us from today?
Hi, I'm in the basement of my home on Finney Ridge, hiding
Basements.
from noisy dogs and other things upstairs.
Yes, where all the magic happens, basements. And I
Yeah.
have a dog here right next to me, sleeping for now. We'll see how this
Oh,
goes.
good job,
But
puppy.
yes, good
Yeah,
job.
mine is very active in the morning. The rain this morning we didn't get him out on his normal long walk, so he gets that later on today. But for now,
Well,
we'll see.
we'll see. We had a tough night over here at Casa de la Titus. Our oldest pup, Ruby, has had sour stomach, which meant Ruby pacing and tapping, tick 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 tapping on the floor, hour on the hour, and one of us having to get up and take her outside. So,
That's nice.
I don't
Well
know what
rested.
this all means. Well rested, yes. But God bless them. We wouldn't know what to do without these dogs. So,
Yeah, totally.
I'm so happy to see you here. This has been a long time coming, and we're going to go rogue here a little bit today. Ordinarily, I'd like to start on this show with just letting you go on your bio and your history and where you're from. But I'm so stoked about your new book, and I
Aw.
just want to go right into that, right out of the get-go here. Sunlight and Breadcrumbs, making food with creativity and curiosity. It's beautiful. I know so much went into this. Tell us about the inspiration for this book and the building of this beauty.
Yeah. Well, so it's my third cookbook. And just real quickly, the first and second books, A Boat, a Whale, and a Walrus, and then Getaway, were much more about other people that have been influenced or influential to me and other places that have been influential to me. And this book is far more about me and kind of my history of cooking and growing up around food, um, and also my connection to the creative world. So I kind of dive into my history as an art student at University of Washington and how that education and my exposure to artists kind of throughout my life had been really influential to me as a cook, but also as a human, and how those two things kind of go together. And so, yeah, this book is much more personal, and I also spent a lot of time working on it. It was about 2.5 years of writing the book with Sarah Dickerman, and also shooting all the photos and doing all the illustration paintings. So it was very good exercise for me to do. It was, by the end, I was really ready for it to be over with. I was like, okay, I've been dragging this around for a while. So it's really nice to have it finished. And I think there's something so rewarding about that point of it. It's such a mountain to climb to get it to, to ship off to be printed. And so once it shows back up, you've had a little bit of break away from it, which is always really nice. And seeing it in real life is such a really great thing. So yeah, it's fun. It's harder to always. I'm really great about talking about everyone else and everything else
Tell me
that
about it.
matter to me, but talking about yourself is always really weird. So
Yeah, I hear you. I'm the same way. I love the book. It's beautiful, and in my world of film, you see folks sometimes producing a film, directing a film, writing a film, scoring a film, doing all kind of the big principal creative pieces. And you kind of took that on a little bit here in the book. And
Yeah.
with the illustrations, was that something you set out to do? Did you discover that along the way? And did it bring you more satisfaction having that ground root level creative inspiration from the get-go and including it in the final version of the book?
Yeah, so when we put the proposal together, it was the intent that I do that. The photography part, less so, only because I'd been working with Jim Hankins for the previous two books, but then he moved to New York, and and a few other things kind of happened where I was curious about taking more photos, and I take a lot with my phone all the time, and I think visually I'm like always kind of thinking about things, but I was like, well, maybe I could take the photos for the book. So that was a bigger hurdle, I think, to get the publisher to believe that I could do it. But we eventually got there, and um, yeah, it was good. I think it was a really good exercise. It was something that I don't think I would do entirely again. I would have like co-photographer, because I think what I found was that it's a ton of work to do all of it, but also it's just nice to see things through other people's eyes as well. And so to have the variety is I think a really positive thing. But there's a lot of photos that get missed, I think, if you are thinking about things in regards to the book. And there's a moment where you see it and you want to take an image or take a photo, and maybe the photographer is not there, or maybe you're by yourself or whatever. And so that kind of flexibility was something that I think would be, if I were to ever do another book again, which I probably will not, but having, moments where you see something and you can just take the photo without asking someone to come get it, or, to kind of like recreate it, is a really fun way of having images.
I do that a lot myself, as you know, light and fast, and kind of show up, and there's drawbacks and there's definite advantages, and the advantages are just one of them. A big one is like you said, when the subject presents itself, you can go. You don't have to quick assemble the team and work all the logistics out. I know too, in making a film, on the back end of it, especially in the edit part of things, having my partner Eric Frith, boy, what a joy that's been to have another set of eyes. And so I wonder if there was any time where you felt like you kind of paint yourself into a corner, or man, I wish I had another
Yeah,
locomotive here to move this train forward.
sure. I mean, always. I think I did have two people, Eric Traw, who works with us at Sea Creatures, and then Jim, kind of look at them, midway through it, just so that I could have some assurance that I wasn't, making terrible images. And then also like helping me make sure that the quality was there. Um, yeah, but I agree that there's sometimes you can't have the best of everything, right? Like I
Right.
think that the the team effort, like you said, it's like there's certain things that you lose and certain things you gain depending on which way you go. So I'm glad I did it. It was a ton of work. I think I learned a lot about how to try to be really organized with images and that I'm really bad at it. And um, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a little bit of my challenge is just kind of too many irons in the fire at all
Hmm.
times. Like
Hmm.
if I were just writing cookbooks or just shooting images, that would be something that I think I could get my hands around. But it's like all of those things, including restaurants, and
Yeah.
it's a juggle for
I
sure.
I intimately understand
Yeah.
of which you speak. And well, okay, so that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing on process, and I know it's a little
Mhm.
painful too, but uh, tell us about the food. Let's get to the good stuff. What was the
Yeah.
inspiration on the food side in this book? What do we have to look forward to when we're opening this up and using it at home?
So it is a book for home cooks, so it is intentionally trying to be approachable. It's not very restauranty at all. Although there's some things obviously, but in general, it's really approachable. It is, um, let's see. It was actually kind of an interesting challenge. I think the first cookbook I wrote, like there was probably 100 recipes that I had to edit out. And then I think having this be my third, like I felt like there are some things that just like the bread pudding recipe that's in the book, it's a different version. And I think I had to kind of get over the fact that I already used the recipe and that like tweaking it a little bit doesn't mean that it's still not a good recipe to have in the book. So I felt like there was some challenges with me personally where I was like, does this, will anyone actually care about this or should I bother putting it in? There's some simple things that like Green Goddess that's just a little bit different than a different version of Green Goddess. There's a million versions, right? So just that challenge of trying to like sort through all that would go into it, I think was harder on this third go to try to make sure I was being creative enough and like authentic to like how I really cook. And also, um, giving myself, kind of freedom to redo things, I guess. So a little bit of
Mm.
all of that. And there's a whole chapter on vegetables, which was really fun to work through. That I think are very seasonally focused. Surprisingly, like a lot of good winter recipes or fall winter recipes, which I think I think it's easy to write summer vegetable recipes because they're just
Totally.
so full and perfect.
Yeah.
But there's like a CSA slaw that was something that I do every winter as I buy a CSA from Local Roots. And like by the end of it, you're like, God, I hate, celery root and whatever, like cabbage and carrots, all the things. But I think I started making them into like versions of coleslaw essentially. So like with beets and celery root and carrots and anything really that would come in my CSA. And that became a recipe for the cookbook because I thought it was such a I don't know, it's like a nice, fresh, simple way of dealing with
Hmm.
a lot of vegetables. And I don't, like I've had pumpkin soup already twice this fall, and I'm now maybe close to being tired of it. Um, so trying to come up with things that are just a little less common. And yeah, there's a whole chapter on anchovies and how to use them, which I really love, kind of speaking to um, it as a ingredient versus its own component, as well as just kind of showcasing anchovies. There's a whole dessert chapter, which my second book doesn't have any desserts in it.
Mm.
We basically got rid of desserts and had cocktails. So there's a lot of like my favorite nostalgic desserts are in this book, including like a really delicious rice pudding cake that Carla Leonardi from Cafe Lago gave me to put in the book, which is a recipe that I've loved for, gosh, almost 30 years. And
Mm.
I know now why she doesn't make it at the restaurant anymore because it's kind of a pain, but to make it just once is really wonderful. So, yeah.
Is there a
Lots
standout? Do you have a favorite recipe in this book?
There's an anchovy toast, like a melted anchovy toast in the
Mm.
book that I really love. That was an accident. Essentially, I had these really incredibly beautiful anchovies that I thought would be interesting to see, like if I could like fry them really quick, which turned into just melted anchovies. So I was like, oh, what am I going to do with these? And I poured it on a piece of toast, and it was so incredibly delicious. And, and it's not anything new. It's like bagna cauda or whatever. But this had like kind of like frizzled garlic and lemon peel in it as well. And
Mm.
yeah, it's just one of those things that is just so simple, but also so satisfying. There's that. What else is in there? There's a really delicious, like harissa adjacent, marinated leg of lamb that I really love. That has lots of like paprika and coriander and, um,
Mm.
there's a winter wedge, basically making a wedge out of cabbage where you kind of burn the cabbage, which I
Mm.
also love because, yeah, I do love
Well,
some iceberg, but I feel like I could do some better vegetable eating than iceberg lettuce.
yeah, and I love that you're shedding a spotlight here on the winter veg.
Yeah,
It's truly not usually the star in the annual compendium of
no,
recipes. So and we're there. We're in the throngs of autumn, certainly heading toward winter full bore, and we're all looking for fresh, local, good, delicious ways to eat the bounty of the land still. So,
sure.
hooray! Thank you.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the favorite always for me is chicories. So there's a chicory
Mm.
Caesar, and I think it's for me like the vegetable that I look forward the most are all the chicories this time of year. So
Mm.
trying to there's also a really delicious one, which maybe is like the sleeper hit of the book is scrambled eggs with chicories. So you basically kind of like roast the chicories till they give up and they're like soft and floppy. And then like quickly scramble really softly scrambled eggs with the chicories and then a ton of Parmesan and balsamic on
Oh
it.
my God.
Yeah, it's like
My
it's a really nice
God.
quick dinner, but also just like the perfect breakfast if you like bitter things. So
Oh, that sounds perfect. And
yeah.
and coincidentally, Venka and I decided to fast today, and
Oh,
you're killing me already here.
sorry.
Two hours into this thing, so love it. Hey, so we're gonna start easing back into the waters of your origin story as a
Okay.
chef, and professionally, you weren't a chef to begin with. A lot of people don't know that. You started out as an art student at the local school here, UW, and
Yeah.
at 25, you had a sharp directional change in your life. What happened, and why
Uh,
why did that happen?
right. Well, when I was in school at UW, I started working at Boat Street Cafe as a just one of the many jobs that I had, and um, I was probably there maybe 2 or 3 years working for Susan, and I had worked in hospitality, like restaurant, coffee shops, all the usual stuff. I was a busser. I did all the fun things and a host. And at that point, I think when I was working at Boat Street, it was such a different type of restaurant. Like it was so specifically Susan and quirky and didn't really adhere to what seemed to be like the normal rules of restauranting in like the whatever it would have been like the 90s, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, and I just loved it. I loved like just all of it. I loved its location, being close to UW and having really interesting guests come in, and I loved that it felt unlike anything I had worked in before. It was really European, French cafe, kind of country cafe feeling. Um, and so like over time, I just kind of like kept doing more and more and more. And Susan was having a lot of transition in her life, and at one point started to encourage me to like buy it. And had I graduated yet? No, so I went away to Rome, my last year of college. And I think the combination of like living in Rome and kind of or starting to understand like the importance food can have on someone's life, culturally and, like socially. Um, and then kind of coming back home and working at Boat Street again. Um, I was just kind of enchanted by the idea of a restaurant, not necessarily buying it by any means, but then she kept bugging me about it. And I was sort of in between whether I was going to go to graduate school or not, because at that point I was still thinking that I would be an art teacher. Um, and yeah, so she kept bugging me, and I went away again to Europe. And then when I came back, she was sort of like, well, if you don't, like if I might sell it to someone else, or, like I need to figure out what to do with this thing. So I asked both my parents and close friends, and they all were like, you should do it. So I was 25 and bought a restaurant, and
Oh man.
had really no proper training. I think um, yeah, it was a quirky restaurant. Like it didn't have like now our restaurants all have dishwashers and like machines, as well as humans, but the machine. But we just had like a 3 compartment sink and a stove that was really kind of rickety. And what I think the best part of all of that was I think it taught me that like you can do a lot with very little. And I think like Walrus, I think, and Lioness, our new restaurant, are 2 really good examples of restaurants that I think kind of are, more like, I think people would be surprised at how small our kitchens are in reality to the amount of food and quality that we're putting out. So I think a lot of that comes from having worked in a restaurant that was, like really, really, really small, and had nothing. Like, we didn't have a meat slicer. We just had a stove and some refrigerators, and sometimes the stove didn't work, and you just sort of make do. And so I think all of that was a really fun, not at the time fun, but in, like, what is it, like type 2 fun? When you look back, you're like, yeah, that was great.
Too fun. I have never heard that. That's good.
Yeah. But we joke about that with type 2 travel, where you're like in the travel, you're like, get me the fuck out of here.
Yep.
Then you get home and you're like, that was nice. And you're just like, what just happened? But yeah, so I bought a restaurant at 25, essentially. That was my very extreme change of life direction.
Well, there's such good stories about jumping into the deep end of the pool, not knowing,
Absolutely.
leaping and the net will appear. And what gave you the courage to do that? I mean, that had to have been
It really, I think,
exhilarating.
is young, right?
Yeah.
I can't really equate it to anything other than not knowing any better. How bad could it be? Really bad, turns out. But at the time, I think I do think the fact that it was a modest restaurant, and also I had been there long enough and working there long enough to kind of see how it functioned. So it wasn't entirely foreign to me that like I was taking over this place. But yeah, I don't know. It was great. I would do it all over again. I would take that restaurant back in a hot second if I could too, but it's all gone, sadly.
Well, it's true. There's these halcyonic memories too about the situations that gave us the most consternation at the time, travel or work or otherwise. And, thank goodness for that we're not reveling in the why did I do that part of it, but rather hey, made something out of this and made something beautiful out of it. And experience is beautiful all the way around. Even when it's hard, it defines this human existence.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
restaurants are I mean, like amazing and horrific places in regards to work, and will always be that way. I think it's just the nature of that kind of work. I mean, it's got to be similar to like running a fishing boat or something, where
I was going to
you're
say very similar.
constant, and there's just always problems and challenges, and financial and otherwise, and yeah, you just have to keep going.
They are similar. I've like you. I worked pretty much front back of the house in restaurants through high school, college, and post college, and same thing. Know enough about commercial fishing boats to be dangerous,
Yeah.
and certainly know a lot more on the processing side. And you're right. There's no those things are similar, and you don't have this just inherent safety net. The thing's got to keep going. You got to keep moving. You got to
Hmm.
jump in there. Bilge pump is broken.
Never
You're out at
finish.
sea.
Yeah.
You get down there with the duct tape and baling wire and figure it out. Same thing in a kitchen. I'm curious, how did because it's evident in the new book, but how did your art training intersect with your gravitational pull towards chefiness?
Yeah. I think, it's funny. I got asked that question a lot early on, and I didn't really understand the connection, or I wasn't able to see it. I think the farther down, the kind of path I got, I realized there were um, things that felt really natural to me around, like, like simple things like how I would plate a dish, but even just like real strong opinions about like interior stuff or choices
Mm,
around dishes or flowers or everything, like the whole visual experience of my restaurants. I eventually realized where a lot of that was driven by kind of a creative kind of training that I had, where you make decisions and experiment on things in regards to how in my case, how you draw or paint or apply certain things to a visual idea. Um, and so yeah, so I think it had a huge impact on all of it. I think artists. There's a lot of artists in the restaurant industry, I think, for a lot of reasons. But one of them, I think, is um, the kind of overlap of just like the durability and the like
mm,
intent to like just work really hard at something. And I think for restaurants in particular, I think to be good at it, it's a lifetime choice. It's not really a 9 to 5 sort of job, and you don't really leave it behind. I think you kind of are always thinking about it. And I find that to be true with my friends that are still visual artists that are, they just work, it's their life, it's not their job. And I think there's some, that's a sacrifice, I think, in certain aspects to do that as your, way of living, because you kind of give up a lot of things. I know restaurants just in general, like your life is the opposite of everyone else's time at work. And so you
right.
give up that just alone. But also you just, it's a lot of it's a lot, like you really have to kind of commit to that. And that felt really not that I was a great visual artist. I think I'm a good craftsperson, but I'm not entirely like I don't think I have the chops to make it in the art world as far as like as a visual artist that's going to end up in some amazing museum. But I can really appreciate the effort into like that goes into that and how you get there. And I think restaurants are really similar in that way, where you choose to live that life. I think to do it well, you have to,
I
which is
agree.
noble and fun. I'm lucky. I feel lucky that I got to work in this field as much as it has been challenging. It's been really rewarding too. So
Yeah, well, and to the rest of us, it's been rewarding. I don't know if you've indulged or tormented yourself with The Bear, watching that episode or that
Ooh,
episodic
I've watched
series
some
yet.
of it. I'm kind of annoyed by it, but
I was wondering.
I
It's
just
usually one
want
of
a
two
different
ways.
story told. Like I think
Hmm.
we keep telling the same story of what it's like to be a cook, and I mean, I know like at the core it's like about relationships, but I
Hmm.
do think you have those without a lot of the bravado and kind of
It's a
bullshit.
lot. And
Yeah.
I think most folks I've talked to that own or operate or understand intimately the restaurant experience are kind of exhausted by it because it's
It's one
it,
aspect of it. I don't think it's the most interesting or certainly not the thing that I think we should be keep promoting about restaurants. I think there's already about enough kind of rap that we take for um, behavior and
mm,
abuse and all the things. And not that they don't exist, but it's not in a vacuum. It's not the only thing that
totally. And I think you have to, and this isn't why I brought this up. I'll get to that in one second. But I think you got to get past the sort of the day to day stuff in the show. Like as a person who is identifies as an alcoholic, it is much more to me about this character who is an alcoholic. It's a child of an alcoholic who is like cannot do good enough,
yeah.
constantly cannot do good enough, and I'm fascinated by that part of it. And sitting here on the couch with my wife and two dogs, we're just like exhausted. We're like, dude, that is just too much. It's so much. But
Yeah.
that's not why I brought it up. The way I brought it up was we watched the latest episode, the latest series and season, and I happen to think the show is pretty brilliant. And I noticed like the they've got their restaurant up and going now, and it's a high end restaurant. And he's looking for that Michelin star, and the thing that really caught me was the visual element of it, and was like it reminded me of you in the flower placement and the the just everything, the details they had, and I was just like so much. I didn't think about it until I watched it in this show. So much of the experience, the dining experience, is visual. Going
Mm.
into the place, and you've done beautiful job at that. I mean, there's a reason you feel the way you feel when you walk into a place, and then the food comes, and it's part of the mix. It's entangled inherently with the entire experience. So,
Yeah.
just an observation that what you've done, I think, is beautiful, and I feel like that artistic piece is enmeshed
Yeah.
with the artistry around the food as well.
I agree. Yeah, I think I was a little too young and it's hard like even in writing the book, like it's hard to like speak to things that might feel a little like I think early on I would feel like I was like reaching for those
Mm,
connections and then I think over time it's just sort of is. You're not having to define it as such. I think it becomes kind of who you are and that I think comes with just time
sure.
um and kind of repetition and kind of doing something over and over again and realizing that there's it's not just happenstance, like it can just accidentally, end up being pretty or interesting or, delicious. It's like effort and, kind of time.
That is so true. And I remember, God, and I can't remember the attribution now. It might have been Bukowski. I don't know, but a writer growing up reading saying that a writer has no business writing a novel until they're 50, and I was like, that's bullshit. What are you talking about? I got lots of experience as a 22-year-old, and
Yeah.
what do you why is my view of the world any different? But I think what you just said about the repetition, it's like the river water softening a stone. There's something that you can't know when you're 22 that you know when you're 50. I mean, I think there's some real truth to that. And
Yeah.
yeah, don't you think?
Cumulatively, yeah, I think so for sure. I think it's I mean, I think both things are right. I think the story of a 22-year-old is really interesting. Um, or fill in the blank every, whatever episode of life that is because of the time and the place that you're in. But I do think like how I speak about what I do now is I'm more confident and less like um I don't even like I'm not worried about saying something because it's like I feel like it's been like w what I've been doing for so long. Like I have like the the years behind me to make it so that like what I'm saying is like yeah, like my art career really or my art degree and my creative like practice really has influenced and been a huge part of my life as a chef and restaurateur. And that I think I wouldn't have been able to articulate when I was 23 or 25, even though like I was really fresh out of art school and had all the art, I was reading art news and I was looking at all these sort of things and going to all the openings and but I didn't have the time and the relationship of that to what I do now
Hmm.
to make it make sense. But yeah, it's fun. I'm very grateful that I kind of landed in both places. I think
Yeah.
I speak about that in the book a little bit where I was really fortunate to have parents that um, encouraged me into drawing classes when I was 10 and then, and still today, are very proud and happy that I was, 25 when I wanted to buy a restaurant and that they were willing to help me. So I think that's pretty uncommon to have someone whose parents both were like, yes, go to art school and yes, buy a restaurant. Like those are both things that most
Yeah,
most people would
I'd
be
say
like,
so.
are you sure? I don't think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So I think I lucked out on that.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful, and I agree with you too on the point that there is a purity of the now wherever you are in the span of your life. I remember being living in the wilderness when I was 25 in Southeast Alaska. I'd guide in the summer and then take care of the lodge in the winter, and I don't think it was much about like I have it all figured out. I certainly didn't. And I don't even think I had that thought, but I do remember some very real serenity
Mm,
and some understanding of my sense of place. And so that came as a 25-year-old person and probably, some days more readily than here as a 52-year-old person, but
yeah.
you were just delving into it. It's a perfect segue, your parents and experiences growing up, and I'd love to know more. Halftime. Did you know you could have the world's finest wild salmon shipped directly to your door? It's true. Our Ava's Wild Bristol Bay sockeye salmon is the lowest carbon footprint center plate protein on the planet, and it's packed with heart-healthy omega-3 fatty acids. Don't take our word for it. Ask chefs like Seattle's Tom Douglas and Taichi Kitamura, who are serving our sashimi-grade wild salmon in their award-winning restaurants. You can have the exact same fillets we deliver to them, shipped flash frozen to your door. What's more, Ava's Wild donates 10% of our profits to Indigenous-led efforts to protect Bristol Bay in perpetuity. That's the place we source the salmon from. Right now, that looks like supporting the Bristol Bay Foundation, granting Bristol Bay's Indigenous young people scholarships to four-year colleges, universities, and trade schools. Visit avaswild.com to join our growing community doing good by eating right. That's save, spelled backwards, wild.com, and eat wild to save wild. Now, back to the show. Tell us about growing up in the PNW.
Ah.
What are your fondest, most satisfying memories of sense of place of
Mm.
this wonderful, truly to the word wonderful place that we get to live?
Right? We're so lucky. I mean, I think for me, it's everything of like all of my like when I think about like my favorite moments of being a kid in the Northwest and also just like when I reflect back, like they're all in relationship to the water. And so my folks, before I was born, they bought a cabin. Um, which is up near a place called Spivada, which is kind of surrounding or kind of within the Tulalip Reservation. And bought this little cabin and would go there. My godparents lived there as well. And when we were kids, we would go there in the summer. We would live in this cabin that had cold water. It didn't have, and it had a toilet, which was outside, but it didn't have insulation or heat, or like it had a wood stove and a view of the water. And we were kind of in these big, giant, big leaf maple tree like forest. And my mom, we would stay there and we would, spend like probably maybe 2 months, like probably more like 6 weeks there. And we lived in Woodinville. So my dad would come up on like Thursday and then spend the weekend with us. But it was, it still is this like incredibly beautiful place that as a kid was just outrageous because I was able to walk up the beach and see Tulalip fisher like families essentially like fish from the beach with those big wheels where they would, like boat the net out and then wheel it all in onto the beach, and it would boil with salmon and everything else that was in the way. And we would kind of watch and kind of witness that. And then we would crab and like I think just like incredible like luxury of that, opportunity as a person to be able to eat all that, but also just like having it become kind of so ingrained in me as something that was so important, I think was, without a doubt the kind of most important part of my childhood, I would say, in that it felt like I was experiencing something that very few people would get to do, it kind of in the quantity of time that I was able to do it, and also kind of see, how it relates to so many people's lives in the Northwest now as a chef. Like looking back, it's just like it's so like incredible. I just feel so fortunate. One of my favorite like things that would happen, it doesn't happen anymore, which is too bad, but this guy would come into the bay, which is Port Susan, and he would like honk his boat horn. And on the boat, he had like a little steam kettle, and he would go shrimping and then steam shrimp and put them in brown bags and then boat to shore. And we would buy bags of like just steamed shrimp and sit on the beach on a log and just eat shrimp and like throw the shells in the sea. And it was insane. Like that kind of that connection to the water and just how simple it was such a like really important memory of mine that I think there's a lot of what I do when I'm cooking where I really try hard to kind of make that same connection with people, where it's like we're by the beach grilling oysters or grilling crab or something, so that like people can really see like how important it is. I guess I don't know, like I feel like we kind of get so detached from where our food comes from and how important it is to preserve it, that making those connections for people and kind of showing them like how special it is a big deal. But yeah, like I think like we didn't it's funny, like I think about things like I remember like we didn't like ever eat seaweed or nettles or anything like that, but like I would certainly like have bull kelp fights with my brother where we would hit each other as hard as we could with them. And, there's just so much all of that like texture. And I remember being stung by nettles all the time, but never once thinking, oh, I could eat this. But yeah, I think all of it, like, and I'm not a big like it's funny, like I spent so much time out on Hood Canal and then now we have the property up in the Skagit, and I think growing up in Woodinville surrounded by Doug fir trees, like I always was very much like I don't want to be surrounded by Doug fir trees as an adult if I can. And so it's such a nice contrast to being up in the Skagit and kind of having that vastness that I think is so unique to that area, but also connected to the water in a way. I was just like, it's the best of both worlds for me, where I can have like big skies and the water without feeling like I'm gonna mold in the trees in the forest. I like going for a visit, but I don't want to live in that. It's like it's too much. It's too much gray and wet, damp for me.
Well, that's lovely. Another lovely segue because I know recently you've got a place in northern Washington
Mhm.
that is connected by farmland and the sea not too far away and a river not too far away. And I got the privilege of getting to spend a little time with you there. It's magical, and
Yeah.
uh, I wonder if that is a matriculation based on these hardwired memories of your youth.
Yeah. I mean, I think for sure, I think there's something, um, it's funny because Dan, my husband, we had talked about looking for like, well, for years we've like been like, oh, we could buy a cabin on the Hood Canal, and I would always be like, it's very dark. Like I don't like I'll happily go visit and spend as much time as I can, but I'm like, I don't think I could like I couldn't live out there. Like it's just too dark for me. And we like thought about like Camino and Whitby and all the other, the beautiful places. But I think there's the Skagit is, I mean, a couple of reasons why is like I spent a lot of time there with my parents. We would go up there a lot and kind of drive around and go to the farms and um it just, I don't know, there's something that was so unlike every other part of Washington about it, like because of that, because of the farmland, I think, and because of like the extreme um shift in landscape. It's just this like, oh, hi, puppy.
Yeah,
That's so
that's
cute.
Ollie.
Hi, you. Hello, hello. Adorable.
Yes.
The dramatic bit of it, I think, is the part that has always been the most um alluring to me, is that you can have like the view out into the San Juans, and then this beautiful ever-changing kind of landscape where the valley is, and then Mount Baker and the Cascades and everything, and the Olympics. I mean, it's quite stunning of a place, and being able to kind of have all that sunlight as well as
Mm.
all of that everything else was always something that I think felt really positive and just like right to me. um yeah, I don't know. And then I think there's also a really great history of artists up there in that area, and that I think has always been really intriguing to me, that artists have gone to that area to paint and to
Oh yeah.
uh, and for for a very long time. So uh
I wonder too if there's a deep connection to a source point from where food comes from. I know for me, as a fisherman, and I haven't hunted in some time, but I certainly would again. Understanding exactly where that food is coming from, and having the opportunity to harvest said food, there for me there's just an implicit sense of security of it's like a warm blanket. I'm like, okay, I
uh-huh.
know, and this goes way back. There's our forebears, whether it's the folks that have been on this land for 10,000 years or, my forebears back in Ireland, there is a real, again, hardwired sense, I think, of security and yearning for understanding that food, which is we take into us, is a part of us, is nearby and available. Is that maybe a
Yeah.
little part of it too, being near farmland?
I think so, for sure. I mean, I think there's well, not even near it, but like having, just things like seeing what grew on our property without any effort this year, that was from the people that lived there before, and then all the fruit trees, um and then yeah, having that connection to the Salish Sea and the river, which all of it's so new to me that I haven't really been able to really utilize it. But um yeah, I mean, I think like in our restaurants and in kind of how I think about food is entirely focusing on as local as possible. And I think being able to be in a place like that and drive to Anacortes and see if boats come in, and see what's on the boat that they're catching, and go a mile away and see this farm that's growing the most beautiful chicories and potatoes that are organic and amazing. And then also like, again, like not very far away, like being able to go get chanterelles that are, just kind of popping up everywhere in the woods is, um, it feels insane. Like I mean, it's a little bit like I think right now in the fall too, where you walk around even in Seattle and there's just like fruit dropping everywhere. You're just like,
I know.
there's so much food,
It's amazing.
and it's it's a little crazy that it's so bountiful. So I had a friend who was here from New York one time in the fall, like probably like late September, and she was just like walking or through the neighborhood and was just like, is that a fig tree? Is that an apple? Like she was just like, what on earth? I'm like, well, yeah, you live in Manhattan. Very different, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely uh kind of an over like a little bit like a kid in a candy store, I would say, like where
Sure.
you're just like, I can get oysters, I can get crab, I can, like there's a picture in the book of a day after when we got back from crabbing up there, and we went up through the slough out into the Samish Bay, and we came back with 15 Dungeness that were just like monsters, and it was just like like I don't know that I've ever had so much crab in my life, and yeah, you're just giddy. It's amazing.
That's a good word for it. Giddy. Yeah. In the abundance and the splendor.
Mhm.
We're going to start winding our way toward an end here, but there's a few things that are pretty important to touch before we go. Your restaurant group is called Sea Creatures. Where did that come from? And why seafood and why salmon in particular?
Yeah.
As far as a source of inspiration and a source of sustenance.
Yeah. So I mean, I didn't want I mean, like, I think it's pretty standard for restaurant groups to be named, Renee Erickson's Restaurants. And I really did not want it to be about just me for a lot of reasons, but mostly it just felt like, um, there's so much more to it than me. And so I just wanted it to represent, everybody and kind of the ethos of the company versus just one person. And so Sea Creatures was, we would call ourselves that kind of like internally, like in regards to Whale and Walrus and Boat Street, um and that was like kind of what we called like the crew of people that work together, being a sea creature, and so that was sort of how that became our name. And I think it's fun. It really it suits us really well. I think it's a group of people that do really have a desire to be connected to um, the sea or
Hmm.
the mountains, or, kind of the surroundings that we kind of get to live in and harvest from. And and then the salmon thing, I think, I mean, I grew up fishing. I remember my dad he would get up really early in the morning and go fish, usually humpies, because that's what
Yeah.
was, plentiful and still are. And
Pink salmon.
pink salmon, yes. And we would eat, like that's what we ate all the time. And so, I think because I was a girl, he probably was like, oh, she probably doesn't want to get up at 4 in the morning and walk down and launch the boat and do all the things. But I would get really mad and I would take our little dinghy out and fish for dogfish. I was like, I'm gonna
Hmm.
fish. If you're
Hmm.
not gonna take me, I'm still gonna
Good
go
for
fish. And I
you.
would like row out to the swim dock and fish off the swim dock. And so eventually I was allowed to go on the boat. And he wasn't, it was very cute. I think his intention wasn't that I was a girl, it was more that I was young. And so we would fish all the time. And I think I grew up also trout fishing. My dad's dad had a place down in Yelm on a lake, and so I just became, I don't know, I loved it. I loved fish, and I particularly loved running my thumb nail down the spine of the fish when I
Mm.
was cleaning it. And I think my
Oh
parents,
yeah.
what is wrong with her? But
The
yeah,
clickety
and then I
clickety
think,
clickety.
yeah, and so salmon was always very much a part of our menu as a kid because it was plentiful, especially back then, and especially with pink salmon, and
Hmm.
and when like when you can catch a lot of fish and you're, very much at that point, like middle class America, like um, you stock it up and you eat it all year long. And so we ate a lot of salmon. And I think then, fast forward to me being a chef, I remember going to like university seafood and looking at all the fish and being like, what is all, like they always had salmon, but and they had other like Washington fish, but like it definitely seemed like there was like this need for exotic fish from elsewhere, and it never really made a lot of sense to me. And so I think over time I just kind of focused in on seafood from here, like as much of it, like I remember like there was a moment where like everyone was buying, I think if they still are, but I just don't pay attention, but like Branzino farmed in Greece, and you're just like, why would I buy this? And yeah, so I just became, I think, hyper aware of the importance of salmon, and then also the importance of talking about it as something that was endangered. And so that's kind of evolved, obviously, over time as there's been, far more news and kind of stories about the issues around the fishery and, and the challenges around wild salmon. And then also, of course, the huge issues around farmed salmon. And so, yeah, it just became a real focus for me and then our company to really focus in on what we can, like try to be as mindful and make wise decisions around sustainable choices that we could serve. And then, without beating it over the head of our guests, trying to impart as much information so that they can understand why we're choosing what we're doing. Because, in all fairness, we don't serve a ton of salmon like we used to. And, most of it is frozen from Bristol Bay. So, yeah, it's changed dramatically. Like, I used to serve, Chinook salmon like crazy. And I would be so excited when I would get a white king and I would just be like, wow, look at this amazing thing. And now it's just, it's so different now, which is sad, but this is how it is.
Yeah.
I also think like for a lot of chefs and a lot of chefs here, even in Seattle, like it isn't different. I don't know that nothing has changed on their choices. And that's the part I think that kind of gets my goat the most, where it's just like kind of like blinders are up and they're just serving what they think people expect versus making choices that are hopefully like supporting kind of better industry decisions around what should be fished. But I don't know, it's so complicated and hard to know if you're doing the right thing anyways. So I get why it's complicated for a consumer as well.
It's a really important conversation, and I think the bottom line is, first of all, there's not a tremendous amount of daylight, I think, in between where I'm sitting and what you're sitting at, and I think it's not only people like you and I that are intimately involved in food, as a purveyor of sockeye salmon from Bristol Bay, and I think there's a very distinct reason. It's that choice of fish that we got into to sell because of the location of what's at stake, who benefits from buying it from that sustainable fishery, and what it's keeping out, ostensibly a massive open pit copper mine, by using those dollars for supporting something that is literally, by definition of the word, sustainable. It gets overused.
Yeah, right, totally.
And I think it's absolutely true that, and this is a whole nother podcast. So we're not going to delve into all of the intricacies of this today, but I think it is absolutely true that the folks, every one of the commercial family-owned trawlers in Southeast Alaska, the folks that have launched a lawsuit about, trying to keep them from fishing, the folks that are the on-the-ground tip of the spear, like you, who are restaurateurs and purveyors of salmon, local fishermen, people that are customers, everybody, I think, to a person, if they have any semblance of education about Chinook salmon in particular, do not want to be the last person to catch the last Chinook salmon, and first of all, live here and are involved in salmon because they love them and they love everything about them. So I think we should have another conversation down the line with some other folks too about that, because there are so many nuances about it. What we do know is that, king salmon are having a hard time right now. Our orcas are having a hard time, right, to say the least, right now. And, from where I'm sitting, the biggest thing we can do right now, for sure, and everybody can agree on and get on board with, is insist that we remove and breach the lower four Snake River dams to keep more Chinook salmon coming back to all of us. But for now, I want to amble. We're going to pick that up on another time. For now, I want to amble down this road. You are an activist for social justice. You were on the leading edge ahead of some time ago when there was a $15 an hour minimum wage increase. You got ahead of that before it was even enacted. Looping in the eating with your fork part of this, and voting with your fork rather part of this, how do you square your sensibility for social justice and the fiscal realities of running a large, complex business?
I mean, I think where I land is I don't, thankfully, and I have business partners that support this, that I think we didn't open restaurants to get rich, and I think, and nor did we open them to be activists. But I think the reality of that power that you have around choice is something that that I felt, and then thankfully, my coworkers and employees and partners all agree on, is that I think that by trying to make the right decision and support something that matters to you, you kind of have a ripple effect of that, and folks can learn about things and also hopefully, support us in that by coming to our restaurants and supporting our choices in regards to sourcing and all those sort of things. I mean, I think there's the concept of sustainability obviously is really challenging. And I think we sort of tried to make it be something that was less about like salmon and more about like our company and our employees and kind of how we attempt to keep it going. I think, it's still a business and we still have to pay people and want to try to run it as wisely as possible. But I think, I think I think this was something that it wasn't like we set out this like from the beginning where we're like, we're going to do this and this and this. Like it's something that's evolved over time where you're kind of reacting to things you're reading about, things you're seeing, just emotions around things and how you feel when you're serving something, whether it's you feel good about it or not. And same kind of with how we structure our business and that sort of thing. So I think it's, we're constantly changing. I think we always are kind of thinking about like, should we or shouldn't we do this? Like we ask our employees for feedback a lot. We send out like an anonymous survey every year, kind of just in regards to, that's sort of how we ended up going away from service charge at a certain point. But yeah, like I think, we're definitely like far from perfect. But we try to, like the main goal of like, like making the most money or even sometimes making money is not that's not the priority at all. I think if I think like I mean just sourcing seafood, for example, would be a great way for us to make a lot more money, would be to serve an entirely different agenda of things in our restaurants. And I think we just have we want to feel good about what we do, and we want to show up every day and be proud and kind of um, feel like we're making the right decision. I know we're not always, or and I think that's why we keep changing and evolving based on new things that come to light, or um, yeah, everything. Like everything's changing in regards to like what you can and can't buy sustainably is something that I think you constantly have to be paying attention to. And I think we struggle with, like, anchovies is a great example. Like, largely mostly
Hmm.
anchovies aren't sustainable. And I think the ones that are really you know, it's questionable. And so like we're buying wine that's shipped across the country or across the world, and we're doing a lot of things by choice that, like we could make better decisions, but we're choosing to do different things, um, that we feel good about. And I think that's the case with everyone. Like we all, like I drive a car that's, uses gas. So one day I won't, but for currently I don't want to put it in the landfill. So I'm going to keep running it until it dies. But um, yeah, I think we just have priorities and we kind of choose what they are and hope that we're doing the right thing. I think for me around salmon, it was uh, a combination of just feeling like utter garbage that I was buying something and serving something to people that I think largely didn't know or didn't want to know that it was the one food source for the orcas to survive in our waters, for the resident orcas. And I just was like, why am I doing this? Like there's other fish that I can serve that's delicious. And it wasn't with any it wasn't a big like, ooh, I'm gonna like make some big statement. I just felt like garbage about it. I just was like, why am I doing this? Like I don't need to be eating Chinook salmon to live. These orcas do. So I just felt like this really obvious choice. To choose to not buy that. And then yeah, and so I think that kind of exposed me to so many other people, you included, who were um doing things around salmon that felt really important and honestly just good to like at least do something versus just sort of sitting back and wondering what will happen. I do think I think in regards to a lot of things, I think um like kind of like moving to like an extreme liberal perspective around it will kind of probably end up where we're like kind of somewhere in the middle. And so
Hmm.
I like hearing from people that are like really bullish about what's right and wrong around things, and like with science showing that, like obviously the dams are doing damage, but like fishing is doing damage, and like so all these things. And so I think if we like can speak to all the issues, we'll like and kind of try to address as many of them as possible. Like we might end up with orcas in 100 years. We
Yeah.
might not. But I don't want to pretend like my choices don't matter, I guess, is where I landed. That's a
Well,
long-winded answer to that. I don't know.
I like it a lot, and in fact, as we wind down here, here's what I'm hearing is that you're doing something, and
Yeah.
you're doing
Yeah.
it based on your heart and on choices that you can make from the position you're in. I think we can have. I'd love to have a roundtable discussion. I'll put it. We'll put a little note on the calendar to come up with a roundtable discussion, talk a little deeper about these things, fishing, and get some unique perspectives from different viewpoints on this. But I think that the fact that you're doing something and the fact that you have the ability to do something, again, I think you said it well, it's going to move the needle. You're going to end up somewhere
Yeah.
in a position of positive momentum toward taking action and getting folks to lean in and say, well, what's going on here, and take a deeper
Yeah.
look at things. Again, I think there's more nuance to talk about, but for now, I love it. And here's what I want to end with is we're living in dynamic times, to say the least.
Yeah.
There are things to dread out there. You can get in this lonely place called your head, where it's the most dangerous house on the block. And I have a lot of empathy for young folks right now who are experiencing anxiety about the climate and resources that weren't as ample as when I was a kid and you were a kid, and all sorts of existential types of dreads. But it's also a beautiful world, and there's beautiful people in it, and there's ways you can take action. We've been talking about that just now. How do you keep your mind and heart trained on what feeds our souls? And what advice do you have for young people who are trying to find their way?
Um, how do I keep my, I mean, I th I think being kind of reasonable with expectations around what I can do. I mean, I think if I allowed myself to go to a place of like I'm not doing enough, I would probably just end up spinning in circles. Um, I think choosing something has helped me, like having
Mm,
salmon be something that matters to me to speak about, I think helped. And that came from I went to James Beard Foundation do these chef boot camps, and it was all the one that I went to was done with Catherine Miller, who actually wrote a book last year about kind of using your voice and advocacy in restaurant and hospitality. And I left that boot camp kind of with my head all just completely undone, with like real no direction of like what how I was going to like use this information that I had learned. And then, but the one thing that I remember Catherine telling me was just like, just choose something,
mm,
and you don't have to do it forever, but like just focus on one thing and like pay attention to it. And I think for me that, and like choose something that matters, that like you feel a response to. And for me, that was salmon. And I didn't really think about it in that way or like have the emotional response to it until Talakwa, the baby orca died, and I watched that. The whole world watched this whale move this dead baby around, and
mm.
I that was the moment for me where I was just like, what the hell am I doing? Like this is insane. And so I just was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna, make a decision to try to inform myself and use the restaurant group that I own as a way to um, make decisions around what we do and how we choose, how our money is spent. And then also my voice in regards to like supporting causes that support trying to save salmon, and then, and by that, orcas. And so, yeah, so I think for me, it was just trying to like be realistic about uh, what I could do. Um, and then, trying to not um, get overwhelmed by it. I
Oh
think for me,
yeah.
'cause it's so easy to just be doomsday all the time about it all. And sometimes I am, and that's fine. But sometimes I think largely it's about um, supporting people that are doing work, especially scientists, um, that are, kind of constantly trying to make the information that I think we already know available for the world to see um, around, data and how we're impacting the world that we're, trying to save.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, and then I think feeling good about it, I think too. I think those are the, like trying to like not be overwhelmed, and then also be proud or happy that I'm in the position to be able to make some impact. I think, especially in regards to like social media and um, the world at large, it's easy to feel like there's just too many things to try to participate in to make better, like financially or otherwise. And I think just trying to like know that I'm doing good where I feel like I can have the most impact is sort of where I've landed on feeling satisfied with that. I think it's otherwise I think I would just, burn out and
Yeah.
probably not be effective on any front. Just like just yeah, unravel essentially.
Yeah.
Um
I totally feel you. And, it's I'm speaking as a person who goes through all this all the time, thinking
Yeah.
about, burnout. And I would add, I love everything you said, and I would add to it that, first of all, just to reiterate that your primary suggestion is to do something, to take an
Yeah.
action. Don't get paralyzed. And the thing I would add to that is what we're doing right now is reach out to another person. Don't feel like you got to go it alone, right?
Yeah.
When you find people that love the same things that you do, there is a lot of love and reciprocity, and there's courage and there's strength in that. And I've certainly found that with you, and from lots of other folks who are equally passionate as we are about the things that they love. So it's just, there's no reason to get stuck in that last house on the block up in your head.
Totally.
So reach out. All right, last fun question is, this is the bonus round. You've made it this far.
Love it.
And everybody gets the bonus round. It's a little thought exercise. You've got part of your life now is in the Skagit Valley, and we're just going to imagine for a moment here, and this is fantastical as I knock on wood. It's not going to happen, but let's just say the waters rose so high that everything was going to get taken away. So you get your loved ones out first, your people loved ones and your furry loved ones. But if there's one physical thing you could take with you before those floodwaters come and level everything, what would that one physical thing be?
Oof. One physical. Well, if the floodwaters came, does that mean like the orca whales would just like get to have more area to live in?
Let's say in our little world here, yes, they got lots of food, and they've got more territory.
What would I take? I don't know. What an interesting question. I don't know, maybe like a fruit tree or something, like an apple tree, or
Sweet.
yeah.
That's a first on many episodes. That's fruit tree. That's really good. Mine is, I've got a box full of journals that, goodness knows nobody's going to want to read them, but for some reason they're important to me from 16
Yeah.
years old on. So that's what I would take. A fruit tree's awesome. You got some, and very Renee, you got food to
Yeah.
keep you sustained. All right, so there's that part of it. That's a good answer. And then the next part is, it's more of a metaphysical thing. If you could only take one trait about Renee that makes you you, what would that trait be that you would take?
I think I would take my Jeremy, my business partner, describes this as like I'm not even confident, but like good at making decisions, like decisiveness, I guess. Yeah.
Totally. Rock solid. I agree. Renee Erickson, you're a friend, and you're a friend and an inspiration to many people here in the Pacific Northwest. Thanks for joining us here on Save What You Love. Your beautiful book, Sunlight and Breadcrumbs, Making Food with Creativity and Curiosity, is available now. How can folks follow you? Where should they check out all the things that you're up to?
Yeah, so our my Instagram is Chef Renee Erickson. Sea Creatures is eatseacreatures.com. That's our website, and you can get on our mailing list to see what craziness we're up to. If you want books, we sell them there as well. They'll be signed. Otherwise, from Booklarder is another great place to get signed books. Yeah.
Get the signed books. They're better.
Absolutely.
You are awesome. Thank you for doing this, my friend. And I'm looking forward to more. And so till then, we'll see you down the trail.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
How do you say what you love? How do you say what you love? How do you say what you love? How do you say what you love?
Thank you for listening to Save What You Love. If you like what you're hearing, you can help keep these conversations coming your way by giving us a rating on whatever platform you're listening from. and leaving a comment on Apple Podcasts. It really helps get the word out. Check out photos on our Instagram feed. We're at Save What You Love Podcast, and you can get links from today's featured guest in the show notes of this episode. Join our growing community by subscribing to our newsletter at avaswild.com and then clicking on Connect in the upper corner. You'll get exclusive offers on wild salmon shipped to your door and notifications about upcoming guests and more great content on the way. That's at avaswild.com. The word save, spelled backwards, wild.com. This episode was produced by Emily Fern and edited by Patrick Troll. Original music was created by Whiskey Class. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you all down the trail.